Hello, everybody. Welcome to the NBC Sports panel, I guess we're calling it. I'm going to introduce it like it's a Roto-World football show. Welcome to the latest edition of the Roto-World football show. I am Patrick Daugherty, joined today by Mr. Devi himself, Eric Froton, by Mr. Best Ball and everything himself. You're not Mr. But you're everything. Zach Kreuger. Of course, I don't know who this person is. He has been terminated, actually. He does no longer work for us, so he's not technically part of this panel. There's, of course, Mr. Denny Carter and Mr. Lawrence Jackson, the star of the Expo. And we're just here to talk about the upcoming 2023 season, take some questions, maybe just riff aimlessly for 45 minutes about really pointless topics that have nothing to do with football. No, we're going to talk about football the whole time. And the first thing I kind of wanted to talk about today is just, I'll ask Denny first, too. Do you see any themes for the 2023 season? You know, some years, like last year, the theme was kind of being pushed like, oh, late round QB is dead. And, you know, late round QB it is dying a little bit. It's not on life support yet. It is in the hospital. We're all praying for it. We're all hoping it'll rally and recover. But do you see any emerging themes for 2023? Like, and if not, don't make one up if you don't. But what's a theme you see in 2023?
I think, the thing I wanted to talk about was the quarterbacks, because with a small crop of mobile quarterbacks who can get there for fantasy purposes without having any sort of a big passing day, I think fantasy managers are kind of like panic drafting those guys. It reminds me, you know, the kids won't remember, but in 2012 we did the same thing after a 2011 season in which a bunch of quarterbacks went crazy statistically, and we said, okay, well, you got to get those guys early in your drafts in 2012 or you're not going to win, you know. And so people, like I said, panic drafted those guys. They chased their ADPs way up, and I think we are seeing that. And this is not to say that like you shouldn't be drafting Jalen Hurts or Josh Allen. It's nice to have those guys, you know. I hope to have them on my team one day myself. But I do think that there are like mid-round guys and some later round guys who can sort of, you know, help you recover if you don't get those elite quarterbacks. Like, you know, like Tua is one that I'm thinking of. Anthony Richardson, hopefully he starts the season. Also a guy like Daniel Jones, whose rushing was really valuable last year. I don't see them going away from that. So those guys, I think, can sort of make up for those points that you're losing if you don't get those top-end quarterbacks.
Denny extremely shook by one bad quarter from Anthony Richardson. He's been off his bearings all weekend. He's declared it over. He has declared him a bust. It is a shame.
I can't stop crying. I'm trying to cope, and I can't.
You know, one theme every year is like the tier jumping offense, like an offense that was bad the year before that we kind of want to get out ahead of the crowd and be in on. The textbook example from last year was the Lions. And it's kind of hard to get in front of the crowd because a lot of people predicted that last year. And then it became true, wildly true. And we're going to try to identify some of the tier jumping offenses. Lawrence, I have to think you think the Ravens are going to be a tier-jumping offense this year because you're all in on Lamar Jackson. We're all in on the improved Ravens passing game where they have an actual receiver core, no longer Devin Duvernay, and no longer like people they're signing in Week 12 that are suddenly getting 9 targets like 4 days later. I want to ask you, Lawrence, about the Ravens offense this year, why you're so – I mean, you've always been a Lamar Jackson backer, but like why you were all the way back in on Lamar Jackson and the Ravens this year.
Yeah, so like we've already seen Lamar Jackson, he's been successful running the offense under Greg Roman. This year, what Todd Monk is going to do is going to get him back to what he was doing at Louisville, and what that is just clearing space in the offense, not being so bunched up and tight, using every inch of the field and taking what the defense gives them. That's what Todd Monken's offense is all about. This training camp, they've even been running empty sets at the goal line, and that's what you want to see for fantasy purposes from a team that was considered very run heavy. So now they're actually going to use their wide receivers and not Patrick Ricard. But shout out to him, though, because he can run that wheel route, you know what I'm saying, if you really need him to. But we would prefer it be an actual wide receiver, and they have new ones of those in Zay Flowers, in Nelson Aguilar. Odell Beckham, obviously, he got the $15 million guaranteed, and you hope to have Rashad Bateman healthy. So even yesterday, watching the Ravens preseason game, you saw them running more pro-style offense, running just regular I formation with the quarterback under center. So once Lamar has that option as well, the sky's the limit for that offense.
Really good stuff on the Ravens. A team we want to like. I think a lot of us don't want to like the Jets, Zach Kreuger, but yet, curiously, you claim they're an offense that might be on their. No, I mean, the Jets are looking up. What do you want to talk about with the 2023 Jets and what hopefully should be obvious offensive improvement?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if people don't know, Aaron Rodgers has been billed as better than Zach Wilson, which tends to create an optimistic outlook for the Jets in 2023. I was looking at some numbers the other day when I was doing a regression article on expected touchdowns, and one of the things that I found last year, the Jets were a bottom 5 offense in both red zone visits, and they were 31st in red zone conversions, converting those visits to touchdowns. I would expect that obviously Aaron Rodgers is probably going to be rebounding that a little bit for them. An offense, I think, even if they get towards a middle-of-the-road production in those red zone visits and those touchdowns, is obviously going to lead to a lot of scoring. One of the guys I became high on while I was writing that article in particular was Garrett Wilson, who somehow managed 7.5 expected touchdowns, which is a metric that's basically, it weighs opportunities in various areas of the field and how many touchdowns he could have had things gone well. And Garrett Wilson actually ranked very high in expected touchdowns last year with Zach Wilson. He's one of my more preferred candidates this year for a guy who I think could possibly have a double-digit floor at touchdowns in an offense that I think we all think will bounce back a little bit.
Really good stuff. And I want Denny to talk about the Steelers. But first, Eric, we need to ask you a question. In the pre-draft process, I asked you about Zay Flowers. So whenever I have a question about a prospect, they're like, well, I want Eric to give me the 15-minute rundown on Zay Flowers. And like truly, I wanted 15 minutes on like these guys. You had amazing stuff on all of them. One of the things I wanted to know about Zay Flowers was, why aren't the college stats amazing? Like, not that they were bad, but they didn't pop, the way you would expect like a first-round receiver prospect's stats to pop. And it's about maybe why Zay didn't produce as much as like a typical first-round prospect in college, but then how he might fit into the Ravens offense, because it wasn't the most explosive offense the past few years, but it could be again. It's basically why Zay didn't produce and what he might do as a rookie.
Well, first off, getting into Zay Flowers in his college, you have to get into Boston College. So when he first got into the ACC, got into college, he was used as a true freshman as sort of a gadget-type guy. Think Kadarius Toney almost with manufactured touches, but they're getting him end-arounds, they're lining him up all over the formation. The problem is he was coached by Steve Adazio, who is renowned amongst the college realm as being one of the least forward-thinking offensive play callers in all of college football. He is now back to being an offensive line coach after an ill-fated stint at Colorado State in which he spectacularly blew 2 games in the last minutes with clock management that Andy Reid would frankly be jealous with. So you have to remember, you're dealing with coaches that aren't quite up to NFL standards in a lot of ways. So his first 2 years, they force-fed him the ball, but it was the A.J. Dillon era. So they're riding that 240-pound guy who's, doing a 4.45, 4.5 40. It was 3 yards in a cloud of dust and then basically throwing it to Zay. In comes Jeff Hafley 2 years ago, who was the defensive coordinator for Ohio State. And he brought in a former NFL OC, Frank Cignetti Jr., was with San Francisco. I believe he was a QB coach there. So when Cignetti came in, I brought in Phil Dracovic, who was a 5-star quarterback from Notre Dame, got beat out by Ian Book, now a backup in Indianapolis, I believe. And Dracovic promptly got hurt. So he was dealing with not just a transfer out of Notre Dame throwing him the ball, he's dealing with a true freshman, Emmett Moorhead. You're dealing with Dennis Grosel, who is the 5th year. He's probably an accountant right now, who was ill-equipped to be throwing forward passes in pretty much anybody, in the FBS. So you're dealing with a difficult supporting cast, an archaic offense, But the good thing about Zay Flowers, and what you got to understand, weighed in at 172 through his entire college career. Throughout the NFL draft process, goes to the Shrine Bowl, weighs in at 182, right? Puts on 10 pounds where a lot of those guys are trying to lose weight in order to test fast. Changed his body, totally rocked up. Anecdotal evidence, but, not empirical. I talked to his roommate at the Shrine Bowl where he was in Florida doing his training. All these guys, they go to these training camps. His name was Christian Young. He was a safety for Arizona. And off the cuff, unprompted, I said, who is here, out of the guys that you're dealing with at the Shrine Bowl, who's the guy that steps out to you as being the hardest worker? And he personally, unprompted, said, it's Zay Flowers. He lives with him. He did 3 months in training camp. He said every morning, Zay Flowers is the guy knocking on everybody's door at 6 a.m. telling them that it's time to go to work, that we have to be great, that if we don't do this, this is our chance. He's living in the moment. He realizes what he has. And just looking at him work out at the Shrine Bowl, they didn't really take him out of the barn, too hard. But he's moving at a different speed than everybody else. And that's agility-wise. That's his ability to win down the field, despite the fact that he's only, checked in at like 5'10", just about even. He has the ability similar to what I look at from Marvin Mims, who 16.2% of Marvin Mims' touches went for 40-plus yards over the last 2 years. Zay Flowers has that similar dynamic ability, despite being, 5'9.5", 5'10". Those two guys I look at from this wide receiver class are the ones that can win downfield, can win short, can extend both in the air and when the ball is in their hands. So that's what I think makes Zay Flowers different, is his ability to be moved around the formation. You give him the ball in any facet. It's not like he's a Rondale Moore where you have to get him touches within 2 yards of the line, the extended handoffs. He wins downfield. He wins before he catches the ball, and he wins after catching the ball. So I think the whole picture of Zay Flowers in a quick synopsis, if that is quick, that's how I feel about Zay Flowers. And I do think he's going to be a very productive player. I have multiple dynasty shares.
And in redraft, I'm now very fired up to draft him. I'm just going to see whatever drafts him on the clock in and start drafting him right now. By the way, very thankful Zay Flowers was not my roommate this morning, waking me up at 6 a.m. telling me it was time to be great.
I have the sudden urge to draft Zay Flowers more, and I have extreme FOMO over not drafting him very much this summer. So thanks, Eric, for that.
So yeah, Denny, we wanted you to talk about the Steelers as maybe a tier-jumping offense. Your friend JJ was kind of talking about how down the stretch last season they were one of the most efficient offenses in the entire league per drive. It didn't necessarily translate to fantasy points. We like to joke about Kenny Pickett, but what is the bowl case for the Steelers in 2023?
I mean, basically, their yards to touchdown ratio was way off, like off the charts bad. This doesn't mean that, and I'm pumping up Kenny Pickett. I actually don't think Kenny Pickett's probably.
It has been put in the paper that you were pumping up Kenny Pickett.
We're going to need a retraction immediately, if you're listening, New York Times, and but I mean, basically, like. That offensive-wide touchdown regression for the Steelers, I don't think is really incorporated into the ADPs of Deontay Johnson, for sure Deontay, even Pat Freiermuth, perhaps even Najee Harris, and I know there's a good case against him, but we've seen running backs get away with it with touchdowns, and we get upset about that, but it happens. And so in an offense, a balanced offense, it's not going to be pass first, but in a balanced offense that is due for some touchdown regression, I think that you can I find myself just sort of falling into Steelers, Hey, okay, Deontay Johnson as my wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 4, like that sounds great. 140 targets last year and not a single touchdown. I'm betting that doesn't.
Well, I'm betting George Pickens too. Let's not forget about George Pickens.
And Pickens. Somebody cut my mic.
If you talk about the Steelers for too long, they do just automatically cut
There's
your
a
mic.
Ravens fan in here somewhere in the back. No. Anyway, yeah, so draft some Steelers.
Real quick, Eric, you mentioned George Pickens. Like, there's a narrative in the fantasy community, amongst like the really sharp fantasy community, that they're kind of already out on George Pickens. Is like, all like the true alphas, they become like target commanders as a rookie. Like, if you're like an alpha, you come in and you just like command targets. And not that he didn't command targets as a rookie, but he was not like a target vacuum. And it was like like he had to win in like sticky coverage a lot. He wasn't creating like elite amounts of separation. Do you think there's reasons to be concerned about George Pickens? Because this time last year, like at the Expo, George Pickens was one of the players like everyone wanted to talk about, and there's no George Pickens buzz really this year at all. I mean, are you bullish on George Pickens still in the NFL?
I love how it's 1 year and George Pickens, it's over. It's over. You want to talk about first-year target hog, sort of acumen. George Pickens, as a freshman at Georgia, went in there with one of the most talented rooms in the entire country. I mean, this is the Georgia Bulldogs here. And he took everybody out. You watch some of the plays he's making downfield. His ball tracking, his ability to separate at the top of the route stem and make high-level degree of difficulty catches. He did it time after time in college, and I feel like the ACL that he got his second year, and he eased into his third season where he really didn't have an effect until late. You saw him in the national championship make an incredible downfield catch. Again, the ball tracking, his ability to make the over-the-shoulder grabs is elite. And just because he didn't get a full target share in a fairly crowded room year one, I'm not out on George Pickens. I know he's a little quirky. I kind of like that. But the way he carries himself, I think, when I was at the Combine 2 years ago, it was Jameson Williams that kind of stuck out to me as being like, this guy's body language is strange to me. Weird body language. The way he carried himself, the way he was acting around people, like, he was taking it almost casually. Like, that's like the opposite of what Pickens was doing. Pickens is all business. You see him with the hood over. He's clapping. He's maniacal. Like, he's housing people in blocking drills. Like, I believe in George Pickens. I think it's a mistake just because year one he didn't get the kind of target share you want him to. Because as a true 19-year-old at Georgia, the year one zeros are real with wide receivers. You don't want to see somebody, getting blanked. He was as productive as you're going to find for a freshman wide receiver. I think it translates. I think he has a much better year two now with Chase Claypool's carcass mercifully out of his way.
Too soon. Come on, man. There are kids in the audience. I don't see any, but I'm sure there are kids in this audience. And something they asked me on the main stage panel this morning, like, who is the player that I find myself leaving drafts with the most? And my answer was Isaiah Pacheco, which is very dangerous. I keep using that answer at everything I do this summer. So, like, the second Isaiah Pacheco, he's actually not healthy for week one. I'm going to look really dumb. But start with Lawrence. Just who do you find yourself leaving drafts with the most this summer? Is it Lamar Jackson, by the way? And if it's not Lamar Jackson, who is it?
Yeah. Definitely going to be Jahmyr Gibbs for me. I'm always willing to get him early in the third round, especially if I start off going wide receiver in redraft form. Just looking at what DeAndre Swift was able to do with the Lions last year, surpassing 70 targets, and they didn't even really like him, clearly, because they drafted Gibbs and traded him away. Swift able to clear 70 targets despite only playing 13 games. You bring in Jahmyr Gibbs, who's averaged 40 catches over his past 2 seasons in college, which that's elite tier when it comes to college because they don't play 16 games in a season. So those are similar college numbers of like an Alvin Kamara or Najee Harris. So you look at that there and you can clearly see that it's not out of the realm of possibility that he could come in as a rookie and catch 80 passes. And that's even with David Montgomery going over 200 touches. So I find myself drafting Jahmyr Gibbs, and as long as he's not going, where Bijan Robinson is going, he's the better value out of those 2 rookie running backs.
With Gibbs, too, there's this weirdly little target competition in Detroit, which we now think of like this really good fantasy offense. Like, we want to target our Lions. And it's like, okay, I got Amon-Ra St. Brown. Who else?
This is Sam Laporta erasure.
No, well, don't worry. There was no
honestly,
Sam Laporta erasure this morning on the panel.
It's offensive. Cut his mic. Cut his mic.
No,
I will say this, too, speaking about Amon-Ra and Jahmyr Gibbs and possibly Sam Laporta. I always say if we're going to take all of these players, then why not look at the quarterback?
Ooh,
In this
no,
case,
no, stop.
in this case, Jared Goff definitely being QB2.
Cut it.
QB2.
Cut it.
Right. Played his best ball last season, leading the fourth best offense. So we'll get a quick look at it week 1. So we're going to know something real quick there. So, yeah.
Lawrence, it's funny. Like, everyone's talking about, like, we just immediately bought back into the Geno Smith revival. But Jared Goff, I'm like, I mean, nah,
I mean, you know, gotta do both there, you know. But with guys like Jahmyr Gibbs and Sam Laporta, with Jamison Williams being out the first 6 games, that's gonna give those 2 rookies a chance to, you know, that's gonna give them a chance to shine early.
Well, it sounds like you guys both like the Lions, and yet neither one of you mentioned the recently extended Khalif Raymond. Very curious, Denny. Denny. So yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs, a really good answer, because Jahmyr Gibbs, I feel like, is a player. Traditionally, people like look for reasons to be lower on, like, I don't want to be the guy who's high on, like, the rookie change of pace back.
Right.
But the case is really strong for Jahmyr Gibbs, a really good player. Basically, do you have as good of a selection as Jahmyr Gibbs, a player you're not leaving drafts without?
I don't. I mean, honestly, the analytics of Jahmyr Gibbs is that the whole Lions front office almost flipped over the tables on draft night when they got him. So, you know, I mean, how are you going to fade that guy? Anyway, I like Mark Andrews. He's a tight end for the Ravens. Yeah, I mean, look, he goes in the 3rd round, and I'm always happy to take him. If you know me, you know I've never drafted a running back and never will. So if I can start out 2 receivers and then Mark Andrews, I feel pretty good about that start. I know that he has a little more target competition this year. But he also will have an increase in pass volume. And I cannot fade him in the 3rd round, especially like late in the 3rd round. I feel like that's kind of wild. I think he should be going much earlier than he is. So I like me some Mark Andrews.
Zach Kreuger, who do you find yourself most frequently drafting in drafts this summer?
We've already got a little bit of Steelers propaganda going around this place, so I figured I might as well continue it.
We're sending mixed messages where we keep doing Ravens propaganda, then Steelers propaganda.
Yeah, we're very pro AFC North here at Roto World. We can't seem to quit it. No, so the guy who I've actually been coming around on and trying to get a lot of in drafts is Deontay Johnson. We already touched a little bit on the fact he had 0 touchdowns last year. Expected touchdowns, he had around 6.5, if I remember correctly. And expected fantasy points, which is also another metric that basically weighs opportunity and targets and how things could have shaped out in an optimal situation. Deontay Johnson was 9th in expected fantasy points last year, which is just, I mean, you're talking about a guy who's essentially getting volume in optimal areas of the field to finish as a wide receiver 1. He's going around the wide receiver 3 right now, just under the top 30. So I obviously expect the touchdowns to bounce back. He's seen a 26% target share over the last 2 seasons. We talk a lot about the 0 touchdowns he had last year, but the media is absolutely silent. Pat, I'm upset that they don't talk about the 15 touchdowns he had in the previous 2 years. So that 15 touchdowns in 2 years is pretty good from what I've looked at. So Deontay Johnson is the guy at his value, about a 5th round ADP. The numbers that we saw with him last year, assuming that they bounce back, is a guy who I'm absolutely in on as the wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 in a 0 RB build, as Denny mentioned earlier.
Well, Zach and Denny have been trying to bully me into taking Calvin Austin in the final round of every draft I'm doing. So
it worked.
It is interesting that you're both still so high on Deontay Johnson. No, Deontay, it really is like about as open and shut as a bounce back case gets. And if the Steelers even improve modestly, which I think they will, the flukily low touchdown rate is going to come up. And Deontay too he's a compiler, but that's not a bad thing, obviously. In fact, he's a champion compiler who just has to score more touchdowns and will score more touchdowns in 2023.
Has to score more, will score more. The Steelers as the team had 12 passing touchdowns in 2023, which sounds like a stat from 1968. So we expect that to bounce back a little bit as well.
I'm going to ask you guys, like, now who's like the biggest name maybe that you find yourselves constantly fading. But I will start with Eric Froton and ask you, from the first round skill class, a pretty deep first round skill class this year. 2 running backs, 4 or 5 receivers. How many tight ends was maybe only 1? Dalton Kincaid. Who is a first round real life skill player that you find yourself fading for 2023, and why is it Quentin Johnston? It doesn't have to be Quentin Johnston, but who is a first round player, skill player this year that you're just not maybe not necessarily for their career, but you're definitely not bullish on for 2023?
Yeah, well, I mean, since you mentioned Quentin Johnson, we will go in that direction. My problem with Quentin Johnson is he's a big receiver who has done a good job when it comes to shaking tackles on like those curls, but attacking the ball at its highest point downfield is not a strength of his. You see, rather than going and extending, catching outside of his frame when he's in those one-on-one situations, I find that he's fading. You'll have the alligator arms, kind of have it close to his chest as opposed to extended outwards. That's something you see all over his tape. And this is tendency to disappear in big games. Every game is a big game in the NFL. You're going to be facing the best of the best. And when he's out there against Julius Brents, Kansas State, some of the better Big 12 corners, especially against Georgia, he got eaten alive. He was a non-factor in that national title game. And the reason why is because he isn't particularly elusive in his route running. He's somewhat stiff, in my opinion. I know you're hearing a lot of him lining up in big slot out of San Diego. I think that's kind of, a way to hide some of his lack of, Drake London-esque dominance on the outside. Like if you watched London 2 years ago and the way he was utilized, the way he was bodying people, very physical, very aggressive, like a true power forward out there. And I don't see that for Quentin Johnson. And that certainly has me concerned, for that reasons, because it's year one. He's a big guy. They typically take a little longer to, acclimate. I would feel better about Jordan Addison, even though he's not, the physical testing that you saw from Quentin Johnson. But he's more slick, Biletnikoff winner, winning in different ways, can run a full route tree. I think you're going to have a more polished version of what we saw from Adam Thielen last year. So in multiple of my dynasty leagues, I had that 7 pick, which is right on the cusp in dynasty of, okay, you're not getting JSN, you're not getting Gibbs. The big QBs, the Richardson, the Stroud, the Bryce Youngs are all out. That 7-8 pick is a real benchmark. And I have been trading down out of 7 in order to acquire Zay Flowers or Jordan Addison to let people take Quentin Johnson. So I've been actively fading him out of that first round class.
And he's been dropping the ball a lot apparently this weekend. So that is the death knell. I saw one tweet about having 2 drops. Like, it's over.
Dude, he does it a lot. I faded him often in the college props market, which is really my core competency, and 70% hit rate over 3 years. A lot of Quentin Johnson unders were in my portfolio last year.
Very good to know as we look forward to the pro betting market this year. Lawrence, who's the biggest name you find yourself fading the most in drafts this summer?
And it's not on purpose. You know how you kind of just do these mock drafts and you just never be drafting a player. And this guy's mainly because I be drafting his teammate, but it's Javonte Williams. I'm usually passing on him and just picking up Samaje Perine. I know they said he ready to go. It looked like he might be ready to go, but let's say he is. Just the history of Sean Payton using multiple backs to get the job done. He's made it known that Samaje Perine is going to be a big part of this offense too. Then you just got the other weapons, Jerry Jeudy, of course, Cortland Sutton looking to get back on track, but mainly with the coming back from the ACL. Combined with the fact that Sean Payton uses 2 backs and the fact that they're in a pretty tough division, I'll just take the better value, in my opinion, in Samaje Perine.
Denny Carter, who do you find yourself most frequently fading in 2023?
Most frequently fading. I mean, I know if you listen to the Roto World Football Show, you will have heard me say that I am not drafting Michael Pittman at his ADP approximately 100 times by now. But I'll keep going. I'll keep going here, and just say that if Anthony Richardson, if they get him under center for week 1, and he does reasonably well and he holds on to the starting job for the season, That's not great. It's not great for the way that Pittman operates. Anthony Richardson in college, very good downfield passer. That's why I like to dabble with Alec Pierce as a late round guy. But not so much on the intermediate level. I doubt that Shane Steichen is going to force the issue and say, "Hey, Anthony, you got to throw it to the intermediate level. You're not very good at it, and you don't have much experience at it, but that's how we're going to do it." No, I mean Shane Steichen's a very smart guy. I think that's probably bad for the type of volume that Michael Pittman would need to be a value in fantasy. And there's also the fact that the Colts are going to be. We had a Colts beat writer come on the show about 3 weeks ago and say the Colts could lead the entire NFL in rushing attempts this year. So I just don't really see a reason to take Pittman over the other receivers going in that area. I just want to hedge my bet a little bit here, okay? If Gardner Minshew finds his way into the starting job, that's great for Pittman. Like,
this isn't happening, by the way.
Come on. If Jim Irsay sends a 3 o'clock in the morning tweet saying Gardner's starting tomorrow, and that's how Shane Steichen learns that Gardner's starting tomorrow, then that'll probably be pretty good for Pittman. So I will look like a fool in that scenario.
Zach, who are you fading this summer?
At the risk of this not working out, similar to Denny's Michael Pittman take, which I'm with him on this, so we'll see how that goes. I'm fading Davante Adams. He's got a late first, early second round ADP, depending on where you're looking. This is not by any stretch of fade on the numbers and what we've seen from Adams over the years. I think he's been obviously spectacular. I don't love the quarterback situation. I think Garoppolo is a significant downgrade. I don't know. Are you a Garoppolo stan, Pat, or are you out on him? Okay, so we're doing good so far. We're 1 for 1. He lost his best friend in Derek Carr as a result of this downgrade. We know that the Josh Jacobs issue is obviously just something else that's a complete factory of madness over in Las Vegas. And then when you consider the cost to acquire Davante Adams and what you're likely passing on to get him, some other receivers who are going within that range are Amon-Ra St. Brown, Garrett Wilson, and then slightly after him, Jalen Waddle. 3 players who I think are all in ascending offenses, 3 players who I think have obviously youth on their side, a chance to be in top 5, top 10 offenses this year. Between Adams' situation of just the quarterback downgrade, perhaps things getting a little bit dicey in Vegas, I'm out on him with Denny hedged his bets. My exception for Davante Adams would be like a disgruntled player gets traded at the deadline somehow and finds his way to rebound some of what he has because the situation gets better. So I'll fade Adams and just go with some younger, talented players who I think are also on the upswing in offensive situations.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask you guys about, like your favorite sleeper, which is the most overused word in the history of fantasy. And the sleepers don't really exist anymore since, like, the drafting public is just so well informed. Like, what I think of as sleepers, I think back to the year Arian Foster was a rookie. And it was just really clear, like, anyone in the industry, like, oh, man, Arian Foster is just going to, like, totally blow up. And, like, the general drafting public just had no idea. You used to be able to do stuff like that. That's just not the case anymore. The general drafting public is so well informed. A guy I just wanted to briefly talk about, but I threw it to you guys, is Tank Dell in Houston, who is kind of losing his sleeper status as he's one of, like, the summer's hype all-stars, but just a guy who has been a box checker all offseason. He's a little older, entering the league, but the explosive college production and playmaking ability. Has, like, kind of the narrative with C.J. Stroud. Like, C.J. Stroud, like, wanted the Texans to draft Nathaniel Dell. He's been blowing up Texans practice since the spring. It's continued into training camp, continued into the preseason. The coach himself has called him an explosive playmaker. There's this massive targets vacuum in Houston. There's kind of Robert Woods, like, lurking in the shadows. Like, he's, like, really ready to, like, miss me yet. Like, he's so ready to be a miss me yet type guy. And, like, oh, yeah, should have been drafting me and not the rookie Tank Dell. But, Denny, I see you very eager to speak, but I'm going to ask Eric Froton about Tank Dell real quick.
Fine.
And to see, are we getting, like, out over our skis, basically hyping Tank Dell so much, or is he a guy as a smaller third-round rookie who could actually make a 2023 impact?
Well, and we talk about the size, and that's the number one thing that you bring up with Tank Dell is the fact that he checked in around 160, 165. But In previous years, that was a real detriment. You know, anytime somebody's a little too light, they're obviously going to get knocked down. But look, you got Devontae Smith, 170. You know, this class in general is a light wide receiver class. Obviously, Zay Flowers is mentioned. Marvin Mims got drafted pretty high. He's like 180, 185. So you're seeing the tendency for the NFL to not discount the lack of bulk in their wide receivers as much. And I think that's, you know, with Tank Dell, it's obvious why. At Houston, he worked with Clayton Tune, who could be the starting quarterback for Arizona. Let's hope so. Guy I had numerous college fantasy shares of because he actually ran a 4.5 in high school. Everybody forgets that Clayton Tune was a hell of an athlete. But, you know, the amount of targets that he was getting, second most in the country, they just kept throwing to him. And, look, defenses knew that Houston was going to go to Tank Dell. It wasn't a secret. It wasn't like there was a full arsenal that they had out there. You know, it's a G5 team playing in the AAC that they have to accentuate their best players, similar to how SMU really targeted Rashee Rice, you know, with just pounding him with targets. Those two were two of the top three in the country for his targets. And with Dell, just his ability to create space with speed, but also agility. He's cutting on a dime at full speed and setting up his cuts, you know, like defender manipulation, all of it, the nuances, the subtleties, the way he uses his agility and his speed is, frankly, it's elite. And the size is why he went in the third round to Houston. But the beauty is he's in a position where they need somebody to do just that. He's not behind someone like coming in with a Deontay Johnson or coming in with, you know, Devontae Smith, as we discussed. He is going to be a bell cow. He's going to check those boxes. Probably going to get at least 100 targets this year through lack of better alternatives. And I don't really believe in John Mechie. I think he's just a straight possession receiver. He's not, you know, I know he's had some good moments in the preseason. He doesn't have that juice. Jameson Williams, the guy stretching the field for Alabama 2 years ago. You know, so I don't see Mechie just out of the box becoming that dynamic playmaking threat. It's going to be Dell. He's going to be called upon to do that, short, medium, and long, because he can win down the field. And that's what we're seeing in practice. He rocket ship. Strap a rocket right to him.
I get a little nervous when we all kind of like coalesce around like the same sleepers, especially rookie sleepers, but sometimes it's just because it's so obvious. And like Isaiah Pacheco was a guy like that last year where beginning early in the summer, just everyone was hyping him. And it can be bad when we're all like get invested in like the same guys, but sometimes it's just because the case is so screamingly obvious. And I do kind of think Tank Dell is one of those guys this summer. Lawrence, you have another rookie you want to talk about. Sleeper, again, is kind of a meaningless word, but who fantasy dark horse, someone from this rookie class?
I just wanted to talk about your reference to Arian Foster. And you're right, it's hard to actually call people sleepers, but if there was somebody like an Arian Foster, I would say Keaton Mitchell from the Ravens. I would say him, but the guy I'm going to talk about real quick is Devon Achane for the Dolphins. Now, I'm going to be like Denny for once. I don't hedge much, but I will here. It's a rookie running back, but he's coming into a room right now where, you know, it is not what you would call an elite stable of backs. We pretty much, if the running back group stays as is, we would pretty much expect them to have a committee, you know, especially between Wilson and Mostert. But if Devon Achane could get a couple of carries, earn a couple of touches early on, and just progress with that through the season, maybe midway through the season, he could see some flex value there. And a lot of people are taking him as the first running back from the Dolphins, as if he has like a 15-touch role to out the gate, which is not the case. So tread lightly with that. But if you could get him in the double-digit rounds and you're willing to sit on it and wait on it, it could pay off later in the season.
Devon Achane's really interesting because I feel like we were really excited about him early in the spring, and like everyone now has gotten very scared. And like, oh yeah, I kind of remembered he's 5'8".
He's fast.
Yeah.
What do you want? He's fast.
So being 5'8" and about 185, we know he runs the 4.3. But one of the tougher runners that came out of this draft class, like really physical runner that'll bounce off the tackles, but has the agility, the jump cutting ability. Like he runs like he's not 185. Now the difference is obviously this the NFL, and it's easier to tackle a 185-pound man than it is a 220-pound man, right? But when you run it with such force, that could, be a little bit of a difference.
Yeah, I just think we've kind of become like overly focused on the negatives with Devin Achane, and you need to remember like a team with extremely limited capital with a really acute running back need, like made a pretty aggressive move to get Devin Achane, and that we probably should not lose sight of that fact. And Denny, who is your fantasy dark horse though that you would like to talk about for this upcoming season?
Well, I mean, I'm guessing with this crowd, there are no dark horses, and the guy I'm about to name, you probably have his jersey already, but he's going as the 20th tight end off the draft board right now. It's Sam Laporta for the Lions. He's taken every first team snap as the pass catching, route running tight end. In Detroit. So there's no question about his role. Where it's nice to not have to guess. So or hope. I hope that he can prove himself and eventually run enough routes per game and to be fantasy relevant. He's going to get that off the bat. He was a hyper productive player in college. The team seems to be very comfortable with him as maybe even a number 2 or number 2B target behind Amon-Ra and maybe Jahmyr Gibbs. So in a productive offense, taking him at tight end 20, I don't think you can go terribly wrong there. For me, the tight end position comes down to Andrews in the 3rd, Kyle Pitts in the 6th, maybe even the 7th, depending on how much your league mates hate Kyle Pitts and how much they were hurt by him last year. And then if I don't get those guys, I drop down. I just wait until a guy like Laporta is there to take very late.
We didn't mean to all talk about rookies for our fantasy dark horses, but Zach, I know you also have a rookie you would like to mention for your 2023 fantasy dark horse.
Yeah, I'm not going to break the trend here. Mine is Roschon Johnson, the running back for the Chicago Bears, coming in as a prospect this year out of Texas. He was the backup running back to Bijan Robinson, which I think is probably what he was more famously known for by some people in this crowd heading into this season. But when you look at a lot of the metrics that Roschon Johnson had during his days at Texas as a backup, he was the elite running back at forcing missed tackles. He was elite running back at yards after contact per attempt. He was also a very high-end pass blocker, which has actually been touted so far even through training camp. There's been some beat writers who have suggested that Roschon Johnson's pass blocking could actually get him on the field earlier than expected, particularly on 3rd downs, which we know works great for receiving upside. But then even from a running back perspective in the early down touches, I'm not sure how high the Bears are on Khalil Herbert. They drafted Roschon Johnson. They signed Deontay Foreman this offseason. We know Foreman has age. I think that Herbert just has working against him. Maybe the coaches don't love him as much as they think they may someone else that they bring in. So I think between the situation and the talent, I really do like Roschon Johnson. It's kind of like what Lawrence said with Devon Achane, is a guy you can draft in the later round, stash, and hope that he emerges later on. I think Johnson fits that mold as being another double-digit back, stash on your bench and see what happens down the line. He broke 4 tackles yesterday on like a 20-yard run in the preseason, which, if you ignore the fact that those are bag boys trying to tackle him, not so bad.
Eric, do you have anything you want to add quickly on any of those guys, on Achane, on Roschon, on Sam Laporta? I mean, not to give you 3 players to talk about, of those 3, who do you like the most? And just what do you want to add?
Well, I guess I would probably say for the running backs, I do like Roschon Johnson a lot for the simple, the fact, as he mentioned, 42% broken tackle rate in college, despite the fact he was playing behind Bijan Robinson, despite the fact he spent the first 2 years of his career as a quarterback. And it's kind of a thing for UT where they did the same thing with Jaquindon Jackson, right? So Roschon Johnson comes in the Hudson Card class and battles to be a quarterback, tries, does his thing, they convert him, and he goes right in. And every time Bijan Robinson came out, they didn't lose a step because he came in and he broke tackles at a similar rate. So they also had a guy named Jaquindon Jackson, who is now the lead running back for Utah. Same thing. Quarterback goes 2 years, transfers out. He's now going to be a 230-pound bell cow for the Utes, and you will see him in a similar role to a vein we see Rashawn Johnson in this year. So for Texas, Rashawn Johnson, I love his profile, love his speed and his power combo, the fact that he can break through the arm tackles. With A-Chain, it's a little different because he's so fast, and it's not everybody knows he's fast, but his acceleration off of stopping is elite. He tends to go around players more than finish runs, but you're not going to find a lot of guys who have that ability to make people miss and not even get a hand on them through acceleration and speed. With Laporta, the Iowa tight end legacy, obviously, I mean, it goes without saying. Fant, Hawkinson, now him. Next year, you'll see Luke Lachey here, who he specifically called out to me at the Combine when I asked him who's next. He loves Lachey. They were both incredible. Ren's a 4.58. Keep in mind when you guys are thinking between Sam Laporta and Michael Mayer, Mayer ran a 4.71, okay? And he was listed to be in 6'4", 265. He ends up checking in around 250, okay? So he's 6'3", 250 instead of 6'4", 270. Laporta out-tests him. He outplayed him in terms of, you watch the separation. Trying to cover him with a linebacker is almost impossible. He's too quick. He's too athletic. He's just another one of those freak tight ends who just probably would be an incredible edge rusher if he really wanted to. So I love Laporta. I'm supporting him over Mayer in terms of where I think you should take him dynasty-wise. If I had to go with somebody who's a little bit down the board, I'll give you two, and I'll go in the wide receivers. Cedric Tillman for the Browns. Cedric Tillman in 2021 was a force of nature, put up 200 yards on the vaunted Georgia defense that had 8 people drafted. It was probably the greatest defense we'll see in the last 20 years, and he lit them on fire. He got hurt last year, which drastically sapped his ability, on the outside, which is why we see, the Giants draft in the 3rd round our boy Jalen Hyatt, where he was basically just in the slot running seam routes and just flying naked down the field, like a streaker at a European soccer game. So it was Cedric Tillman who was doing the hard work on the outside and he was crafty, getting open, not just through his skills, but through his craft and his route running and his deception. So I've heard good reports out of him for the Browns camp. I think you're going to see him emerge as a strong number 2 next to Amari Cooper. I don't know if it'll be this year, but I do think next year, that's somebody to keep in mind. Tillman can do it.
Yeah, Tillman was one of my fantasy darts. He's blowing up camp. Like, he could even make a 2023 redraft impact. We're sadly almost out of time. We did not build this as a Q&A, but does anyone in the crowd, we have time for like a question or two if anyone has a question. If not, we'll just keep talking. Yes.
Man on the street. Here we go. Come on.
What we're hearing about Deneric Prince, is it anything there, or is it just some camp talk?
Froton, the question is, of course, for you.
Of course. Deneric Prince. Do not call him generic, okay? He's generic. I got to see a lot of him. Tulsa running back. Got to see him extensively at the Shrine Bowl, and frankly, he was the best back there. Valladay was there, too. I know he was getting some buzz. But as far as Deneric Prince, got hurt in 2021, comes out last year, and really asserted himself in that room where he had a guy, Austin Watkins, that was pretty damn good. He was a similar situation. He got hurt, and he had to step up. Look, seeing him in Shrine Bowl camp, he's way bigger than you think, and he ran, like I want to say, right around a 4.5, maybe even a sub 4.5. So he was just seeing the Patriots, being around their coaching staff, being around their, the camp, seeing them for 4 days at Shrine Bowl. They loved him. Loved Deneric Prince. And as I'll tell this as sort of an outro, Bill Belichick did not mince words about these guys. I talked to Scott Matlock, who's a 6th-round defensive tackle for the Chargers, and said, what's Bill like behind the scenes? And he said, the 3rd practice they had, he pulled them aside before they went out, and they said, there isn't one guy on this entire team that can make our roster. He's like, you better get out there and show me something, or you're never going to see the field in the NFL, and I'll make sure of it. And those guys went out and started cracking pads. So Deneric Prince was, from the guys I talked to on the Patriots staff while I was there, was a big favorite of the Patriots. They have a million running backs, but I'll tell you, when it comes to, how you form, what you look for in a sweeper running back, size, agility, catching the ball out of the backfield, burst, great shot down the board.
And all I can really say about Deneric, too, is that he has been, officially a drumbeat player, as we kind of call them, where the hype started immediately after he signed. Or was he a seventh-round pick? I can't remember. Was he undrafted or a seventh-rounder? Seventh-round pick. The hype started immediately in, padless spring practices, but it's continued into summer practices. It seemed like the media really likes him. The coaching staff really likes him. It seemed like he's going to make the team for sure. Isaiah Pacheco should be healthy, so it could be hard for him to make an early career impact, but is another guy where it seems like the hype, started maybe aspirationally, but is very real now and should make the team at the very least, which is step one for a seventh rounder.
220 pounds running a sub 4.5 at a running back. You're going to get attention.
Any other? We're about to get kicked out here. One more question. Yeah. Okay. Well, now we're done. Apparently, one more question. Or no one even has a question. So my question.
Don't make me run down with this mic again.
For you guys is, did you survive? Did we make it? Did you think you gave the people of Canton, Ohio, what they deserve? Denny. Why was your performance subpar, Denny?
I think pretty much you should be guaranteed to win all your fantasy leagues this year. So, if you don't, it's on you. But we gave you everything you needed in this hour. So, we tried to prepare you.
And just thank you so much for coming and listening to us. Really just riff and
appreciate it.
Yeah, really, really appreciate it. Really love the event. So we've enjoyed every minute of it. We're going to be around on more panels the rest of the day, talking some best ball, doing some redraft, Lawrence in a mock draft. What are you talking about, Denny, by the way?
I'm talking redraft.
Yeah, Denny's doing redraft strategies. So check that out. Thanks to Bob Lung for having us. Thanks to all you guys for listening to us talk.